Hello, I'm Mandi McLeod. Welcome to Straight Talk. Will a math decision to change import standards open the way in New Zealand for PRRS, porcine reproductive and respiratory syndrome? What could this mean for our pork industry? A gaping deficit in the river of knowledge and technology on which farmers depend to maintain growth in food production has opened up, which could take decades to fill. So says author of The Coming Famine, Professor Julian Cribb, about the current level of research and development in agriculture. We asked the Director of Massey Agriculture if this is a fair assessment. And with no end in sight for the milk pricing debate, we explore whether it's all really about an attempt to destabilise Fonterra. Joining me today is Professor Jacqueline Rowarth, Director of Massey Agriculture and Professor of Pastoral Agriculture, and Dr Matthew Smith, General Manager of Alltech New Zealand. Welcome. Jacqueline, is this really a fair assessment about the research and technology in New Zealand?
It's a statement about the whole of the world. And over the past 30 years, gradually research and development money has been declining in terms of investment all over the world. In New Zealand, we've simply followed the trends. Our yields have not, in a general sense, increased over the last decade. And recent research out of America has shown that in order to be able to really capitalise on investment in agriculture, it probably takes 35 years. So Professor Cribb is absolutely right that there is coming a deficit. New Zealand is desperately trying to catch up, and part of the reorganisation of the Crown Research Institute is about better use of money, but we are going to be into a bit of a hiatus.
So with that in mind, how strong do you think research and development in agriculture really is in New Zealand today?
Strong as in we're doing some fantastic work despite the system in which the scientists are working. And a lot of research in New Zealand is actually targeted agriculturally, but we also have a fair amount of money in New Zealand in terms of government expenditure going in other directions, and it might be an idea to think if we're really funding the research we really need at the moment.
So given that, and I'm going to come to you in a minute, Matt, where should we invest more money in agriculture in New Zealand?
I mean, if I had $10 million or $50 million, I would be talking to the top scientists in the areas that we really mind about in terms of food production and environment, and allowing them to liberate their brains and follow the areas where they think it will make a difference. And so people like Stu Ledgard that you've talked with, Tony Parsons at AgResearch, Stephen Goldson in Biosecurity, Alison Stewart in Biotechnologies, Brent Clothier in Water, all of those top people, the whole group, the Greenhouse Gas Alliance that's based in Palmerston North under Harry Clark. He's got Graham Atwood and Peter Jansen. These are fantastic scientists, and they spend too much time filling in paperwork, and actually we should be giving them a chunk of money to say, do your best, look forward to the ideas in the future. And this would be like the integrated skunk works that a lot of innovators, Skunk Works, Lockwood, back in the war.
Right. I was just imagining all these skunks running around.
No. This was when the top people at Lockwood were told to go away for 6 months and come up with a plane, and they cut the time to get this defence plane, or probably a bombing plane, working. They produced a safe plane at sort of a quarter of the money within half the time, and it was because they were given money to think and work together. Remember, we've got a dreadfully competitive system in New Zealand, and a lot of cooperation is struggling and happening despite the system in which we're working. So liberate the scientists and great things will follow.
Matt, Alltech is a company that really prides itself on its research and development. How does that operate? Because from my limited understanding, it's very much like Jacqueline has identified, that lots of the guys are given bubble time. Is it?
I would echo very much a lot of Jacqueline's comments along those lines. It is very much about taking the restrictions off the way the way that people act, the way they interact with their peers as well, in terms of finding a way forward. I find it interesting here in New Zealand. It is a poor state of affairs in terms of the investment in research and development. And when I say a poor state of affairs, it's a wonderful place to come and do research and development. However, that really shows you how in other parts of the world, certainly research and development is taking a much more of a nosedive, I'd even say, Jacqueline, particularly in the US, particularly in Europe in terms of government funding. And that's very much where be it Crown research or be it private research generated by a company such as the one I work for, it's extremely important to start from the education with the youngsters, bring the bright minds in and take the fetters off, take the blinkers off them and allow them to move forward and bring us the innovation. Because we need that innovation moving towards 2050, all those people to feed. It's incredible to think that we need that innovation. And it's out there, but we just need everybody's focus to make things happen.
Matt, according to Country 99 TV News, Kaimo Cheese is the latest of the independents to join the bandwagon around milk price regulation. This issue seems to have more legs than a centipede. What do you think it's really about from your perspective, having travelled globally?
Oh, I would like to view it very simplistically, Mandy, and I would love price regulation. And price regulation is a great thing, provided we have cost of production regulation as well. That's really what makes the difference, and I think until we can integrate ourselves much more effectively, particularly in the dairy industry, I think price regulation, despite that there are corners of the world where it's worked effectively. A few years ago we would be talking about how well it's working in the Californian dairy industry. Maybe we'd think a little differently now in 2011. So when I say I welcome it, I only welcome it when we get that cost of production. And that's regulated.
You had me worried there for a minute, Matt. I was like, asking, whoa, where are we going? Jacqueline, do you think that it is an attempt to destabilise Fonterra?
It's an attempt for the smaller companies to get what they regard as their free right and entitlement. And remember, New Zealand is a pioneer country, and we have the attitude that everybody deserves a go, a say, or any of those sorts of things. So it's give the little guy its time and its support. It will destabilise Fonterra, and Fonterra is our greatest treasure in terms of agriculture, and agriculture is our greatest treasure in terms of the economy. And we keep seeing the statistics. You probably saw New Zealand Stats last month producing the productivity growth. Well, only 3 sectors grew in terms of multi-factor productivity, so that's labour and capital and everything. And this was before the debacle of the latest insurance company going bust. So finance and insurance was one with productivity growth, but we now raise eyebrows about how that was achieved. Telecommunications, but they're tiny. And agriculture. And agriculture, with its multi-factor productivity growth, is still driving the economy. And that links back to the research and development that we were talking about earlier. It's this whole continuum, and it's been great. So
Jacqueline, with that, again, taking that one step further, we see that an introductory change into the way that pork imports are made for cuts of 3 kilos or less, the way they're going to be treated. Surely that opens its way for PRRS, the porcine reproductive and respiratory and reproductive syndrome. How does this fit in with the fact that agriculture is one of those top 3?
It doesn't. And the problem with free trade agreements is that it works 2 ways. Most people don't realise 40% of our food, at least, is actually imported. And they also don't understand that the regulations that we're putting on the country, like not having farrowing crates and sow stalls, and like not having battery cages, like having the Holidays Act and the minimum wage and ACC, all of those things, and including the resource management and the whole issues about clean streams, all of those are costs to food production, which other countries don't have. And if we've got a free trade agreement with them and they can send their food here and it's cheaper, we know what will happen. So our New Zealand farmers, with this move, are under threat even more than they already are.
Matt, how do you see this? Because you travel a lot, and I would have said up until recently New Zealand's biosecurity when you come into the country is absolutely second to none. Now it scares me.
Our industry, the country is very much at a crossroads in terms of moving forward, as Jacqueline was talking about on the free trade side. Our brand is something that we value so highly, and any threat maybe that comes to that brand is extremely serious, and you know, we have to weigh those measures carefully. But as we move forward, again, as Jacqueline referred to, you know, those costs of production, our industry, whether it be research and development, have to find a way of reducing those costs, improving the performance from what we have here, and we know we can do that. And that moves us forward, and it secures our position on a global basis as well as in the domestic market.
So probably what we need, just before we go to the break, is more government support for our farmers at a supportive level rather than at a regulatory level. Great.
Yes.
Coming up after the break, Māori farmers get set to upskill and upscale as the need for non-Māori partnerships is recognised. You can't eat the view, they say. Auckland's rural cash cow. Are farmers around the super city being unfairly treated when it comes to digging deep to pay those rates? All this when we return. Stay tuned. Welcome back to Straight Talk. Farmers around the city of Auckland are being charged premium rates for what amounts to having the privilege of living on the coast. How will this affect our rural colleagues? Will it price them right out of the paddock? What do you think, Matt? You're a Auckland sider?
Again, as we were talking about earlier, Mandy, it's those costs. Will that premium be afforded by the general populace? I doubt the premiums can be attracted, so it is pretty anti-competitive, yeah.
The way I see it, and it was reported in one of the papers just recently, that a 125 hectare farm on the outskirts of Auckland is paying $17,000 worth of rates. Now that's far more than its productive capacity, and far more, as you said, than any farm away from the city. Jacqueline, how can this, you know, as Matt said, it's anti-competitive, so how can it stand?
It won't. The idea for those farmers would be to get some sort of RMA departure, break up into lifestyle blocks. Average tenure on a lifestyle block is 3 years, but when people realise it's actually very hard work growing grass and rearing animals, and we'll lose the productive capacity of that land completely. It'll go to houses.
But surely that's not what we want when we talk about the future, you know, the future of food. So
it's mad. It
is mad. So how do we get here?
I find it interesting to see in most countries now, if you look at the biggest increase in terms of land use and in terms of animal, not necessarily animal production, but animal placement, it is in the lifestyle block holding market. But as Jacqueline said, nobody really focuses on what their tenure involved in that is. And so many people think that they'd like to have a slice of agriculture, and boy, oh boy, it's probably a good education for them because it shows them just how difficult it actually is. But in the long term, whilst we see a growth in that area, I struggle to see how it helps our industry move forward.
So is it just a greedy attempt to land grab by some, dare I say it, latte drinkers who want to have that piece of land on the coast and can afford to have it as a non-productive farm versus someone who has it as they've lived there for all their lives? I mean, that's what it seems to me, is that somebody in an office somewhere has decided that land shouldn't be in agriculture, and so they're making it impossible.
I would suspect that they've simply done it on land area and not had their brains in gear in terms of what it actually means, in terms of the actual use. So the ultimate end will be pretty ghastly. And the comment about animals, you know, we go the same for gardens. Lots of people setting up gardens and so that they cook their own vegetables or create their own vegetables, and what happens? They don't actually harvest them at the right moment, and so they go back to the shops. New Zealand needs to be using its land very sensibly. Land close to the CBD is always more expensive in terms of actual purchasing, and I suspect that we need some proper policies, rather like we've had the Land and Water Forum, which all turned out to be about water. We need some proper consideration of land use in New Zealand, and then some government assistance, as in so many other areas, to actually say, yep, this is our most valuable land, these are our great farmers, they're doing the good stuff.
Let's make it productive.
Yep.
Speaking of production, there was a recent report that cited 80% of Māori land was unproductive. At the recent agribusiness conference in Rotorua, we had, is it Tuku Morgan,
yes,
was talking about the need for Māori-specific training and education. Jacqueline, coming from the education sector, is this what we need?
I wouldn't have thought so. I think that there's huge amounts of research around the world that suggests that mainstreaming is the way you get advances. and that any sort of division actually tends to mean that the group that might not be, as it were, in the top group that's got lots of resources being poured into it might not perform as well. So we could say we'll take a special group, and that's certainly what Tuku Morgan was talking about, setting up special training systems. I think that will be incredibly expensive for the country and not achieve what he wants to do.
We've seen Dean Nakora, Matt, you know, probably one of our more successful Māori farmers succeed under the mainstreaming system. Why is it that he can do it and other Māori can't?
I would say in answer to that question that it's about balance. It's always about balance. Whilst there are huge advantages to be had in terms of farming in a particular, whether it's a cultural or religious sector, and the sense of community that comes from that is possibly something that the industry in general can learn from. However, that balance has to come in terms of accepting the mainstream way of thinking in order to actually be productive and contribute to the economy.
To me, when I see these statistics and these reports, and I look at my own farm performance, and I think, could I, you know, hand on my heart, do I think that I'm in that top 20% if I looked at that in terms of achieving full production? The answer is no. So why are we singling out Māori? Because to me that almost makes them sound like second-class farmers, that they have to have this category of non-productive.
What we are missing is a huge generation of Maori farmers, and Massey has been involved, as has Lincoln, in specific attempts to help through some of the technical institutes, for instance, in terms of giving them the experience, education, skills, attributes, knowledge. I have to say they don't want to do it. I'm quoting Professor Robert Anderson, Dean of the College of, Pro-Vice Chancellor of the College of Sciences now, who said we were deeply in Rotorua trying to assist this big development, but there's been a big Maori push for law and medicine, and agriculture has not been part of it. And agriculture is hard work. A lot of those lifestyle blockers that we mentioned earlier leave the farm, the 3 acres or 10 acres, saying it's a mug's game. That's terrible. But in New Zealand, where our farmers are our greatest resource. So if we send the signals back, then we'll have Maori participation and mainstream it.
Matt, you've travelled a lot. What examples have you got of other Indigenous agricultural groups that may be facing similar issues?
I would say, Mandi, that the experience that I would have come across is more in terms of cultural and religious groups. And as I said before, looking to work on their own to a certain degree, very much with their own community. But the only way forward, particularly if we look at the US, we look at some of the natives in the US, indigenous population, there have been huge struggles in terms of education. And I think, again, coming back to the point that Jacqueline made, it's that education at an early age. And if it doesn't happen at an early age, it's a question of just giving, giving, and there's very little coming back, and that's a recipe for disaster.
So what I'm hearing both of you say is that we need an education that may not necessarily be Māori specific, but is really targeting the group of people that are going to come in and fill that gap for us.
The enthusiasts who will really enjoy it. And once we get rewards in there, which picks up on everything we've been talking about, then the young will follow. And they will have the rewarding careers thereafter. But it might mean getting up early in some cases.
We all hate that.
That's enthusiasm. That's enthusiasm.
I've been milking cows recently. 4:30 is early in the morning.
It's stupid o'clock. Matt, Livestock Improvement have recently announced a $10 million loan to agri to support their bid in taking over PGG Wrightson's. What do you make of this?
Oh, I would feel, working for a global business, that it's an inevitability. And we look outside these shores. We have to. That's our focus. And the PGG deal, I think, is symptomatic of what is going to continue to happen here as we move forward. Just
very quickly before we go to the break, do you think it's a clever move on LIC's behalf to get a foothold in the seed business?
I think it has to be, yes. Yeah.
Great. Coming up after the break, we asked Jacqueline and Matthew what's got their goat. Will it be a rant or will it be a rave? Find out after the break. Stay with us. Welcome back to Straight Talk. Time now for our weekly rant or rave. Matt, what have you got for us?
I'm a little bit sick and tired of seeing our ministers actually state in public that farmers are always moaning about milk price, and they have done since time immemorial. We don't need to be told that. Any other industry, we don't see those comments, and we know that the suppliers are never ever happy with the prices that they're paid. It's all about focus, cost of production, and ensuring that people get a fair return for what they're doing. So please, Mr. English, no more comments like that.
Oh, bravo. Jacqueline.
I'll pick up directly on that and rave about the New Zealand farmers, most of them, who are doing this remarkable job, not making statements about the difficulties of it, and even better, who actually encourage their children to follow their footsteps, because those are the ones that has got all the natural attributes in farming. It can have a great future. In fact, it has to have a great future in New Zealand, and our farmers are doing remarkable work under increasing exigencies with the tools that they need being taken away from them. And they're still producing food, and they're still getting up and moving the animals and milking them and all of those sorts of things. They're fantastic.
I agree entirely. So following from that, I have a rant. TV3 News broadcast a story about the water quality in the Waikato River. I feel it was biased and misleading. They used a picture of beef cattle when they were talking about dairy cattle. The Waikato River was in flood and therefore looking dirty because of all the silting. The statistics they used to represent the lack of change in farmers complying with the effluent weren't explained. 65% of farmers are complying, and that is increasing every year. Poor form, TV3. And I want to pick up on your rant, Jacqueline, because I also think that we need to have more generational farmers coming through. I would like to think, again, picking up on the points both of you made around education, that those farmers coming in are educated not only in farm management practices, but they've got the business skills to run what are becoming increasingly complex business operations. And I don't see that happening a lot.
Well, we adjust our degrees all the time, and Massey has the agribusiness degree, it has the business degree with an agricultural flavour, and it's got the science ones and the applied science, agri-science type degrees as well. But remember, and this could be the whole article, you know, a whole show on its own, that the students coming in are very different from the ones that went through when I went, you know, 30 years ago, or last year when you went through, Mandi. And we've got a huge amount to do with them in terms of professional development. Now, we are, all but Lincoln and Massey are working on this. And remember, we've just established the Centre for Farm Management that involves Massey and Lincoln with Primary Growth Partnership funding. So we're doing our best with that. But what we need are the draws, the rewards, the status, salary, variety, creativity and security that these children are precious children. Remember, there are only one or two of them in the family mostly. They need to have all the rewards to get them through the system.
Now, Alltech have got a really innovative program called the Young Scientist Award.
Yes, Mandi, that's a program that we've developed over recent years, where really on a global basis, it starts countrywide, moves to regional and then moves to a global basis. We're looking for those young minds to come to us with their ideas, and the Young Scientist program has now really gained huge traction. This year we're expecting somewhere in the region of 50,000 entries from around the world. Those will move forward from a national to a regional to a global competition, and we announced the winners of those competitions at our annual Feed Symposium in May.
So how does that pick up from what Jacqueline is saying? And we were talking before about the getting these young minds in and to get them just to blossom. Is this what this is aimed for, and is this going to, you know, is there a bit of a synergy that Jacqueline can start feeding some of her brains into?
We need those brains. We need those brains. And it goes back to the point we originally made, that it's about giving people the support and the incentive to say, take the blinkers off. It's a wonderful world out there. There's a lot we can do, and bring us the innovation, and we'll support you in that.
Fabulous way to finish the show. That wraps up our latest edition of Straight Talk, brought to you by Straight Furrow. I'd like to thank my guests, Professor Jacqueline Rowarth and Dr. Matthew Smith. Thanks to you too for watching. Remember to check out my blog online at country99tv.co.nz. I love hearing from you. Catch you next time, and in the meantime, keep on talking straight.